Welcome to Seriously Sus, the podcast exposing shadiness with a side eye, hosted by Nanette and Miranda. And we're here to uncover true crime trends and internet chaos that makes you question everything. So get your side-eyed ready, because things are about to get seriously sus. Hello, and welcome back to Seriously Sus, the podcast where we take the internet's most confident claims, tilt our heads slightly, give the side eye, and go, I'm
Miranda.
And I'm Nanette. First of all, happy tax day to everyone who celebrates.
And a solemn moment of silence for everyone who said, I'll do it this weekend.
If you are listening to this while actively filing your taxes, please know we support you emotionally, but we are not responsible for your decisions. This is an entertainment podcast. We are not attorneys. We are not accountants. We are simply two people who have read way too many court opinions, so you don't have to.
Never take math advice from me.
Or me.
And today, because it's April 15th, we are talking about tax conspiracy theories. And we're not talking about, oops, I misunderstood a deduction. We are talking about full-blown, the IRS isn't real and I'm a sovereign being energy. Ones that promise freedom, enlightenment, and sometimes jail.
Every year, without fail, the same ideas resurface. Someone on the internet says, actually, income tax is optional.
And someone else says, wait, is it?
And the courts, quietly and deeply tired, say no.
Not even a little.
So today, we're doing a full breakdown of the 6 biggest tax conspiracies, why people fall for them, and how the courts decide whether someone is genuinely confused or willfully defiant.
And as always, receipts are in the show notes because nothing ruins a conspiracy faster than footnotes. Why tax conspiracies exist at all. Let's talk about why taxes are such fertile ground for conspiracy theories. Taxes are the one and only time the government interacts with everyone personally. And it's not abstract, it's not policy, it's not vibes, it's your money.
Taxes hit a very specific psychological nerve. It's money, which is survival. It's authority, which is power. And it's confusing, which triggers shame. And shame is the gateway emotion to conspiracy thinking.
And the system is intentionally complicated. Not because it's evil, but because it's trying to govern millions of different financial lives at once. But complexity makes us feel stupid, and feeling stupid makes us angry.
And when someone is angry and overwhelmed, they're primed for a narrative that says, you're not stupid, you're being lied to. Every tax conspiracy starts there. That's the emotional hook for every tax conspiracy we're going to talk about.
Conspiracy 1. The 16th Amendment was never ratified, aka, I found a comma and now I'm free.
Okay, we need to start with the big one, the original sin, the conspiracy that launched 1,000 YouTube channels. If tax conspiracies were a cinematic universe, this would be the origin movie.
Dun, dun, dun. The theory is simple, elegant, and incredibly wrong. The 16th Amendment, the amendment that allows Congress to tax income, was never properly ratified. And therefore, the income tax is unconstitutional and the IRS has no authority. And everyone currently paying taxes is a sucker. Which is extremely appealing as a conclusion, but it's wrong.
This theory didn't start online. It starts basically the moment income tax becomes permanent in 1913. Before that, federal income tax had been temporary, mostly for wars, and it mainly hit the wealthy. But once income tax became permanent and starts to affect regular workers, resistance explodes.
Hear that? At first, it's political resistance. This is unfair. This is too much power. This will never end. But political arguments lose in court.
So the opposition evolves. It becomes legalistic. Instead of saying this is unjust, people start saying this is invalid. And that is a crucial psychological shift.
The 16th Amendment had to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. And ratification involves paperwork. legislative journals, transmitted copies, which means inevitably minor differences like a missing comma, a capital letter, spelling variations. It's going to happen. And conspiracy thinkers seize on to that.
They argue that because some state documents weren't word for word identical, the entire amendment collapses, which is like saying your mortgage is invalid because someone used Times New Roman instead of Arial. This argument sounds compelling if you don't know how constitutional ratification actually works. And if you want it to be true, when this argument hinges on commas, you're in danger.
A big reason this conspiracy survives, it doesn't feel emotional. It feels academic. You're not yelling, you're researching. You're not refusing to pay your taxes, you're uncovering fraud. It lets people feel like they didn't break the rules. They outread the rules. This is rebellion with a highlighter, and that is catnip.
This theory spreads in waves. Early 20th century pamphlets and speeches. Mid-century, it was newsletters, talk radio, and political groups. Then in the 1980s, enter William Benson. Benson doesn't just believe this theory, he commercializes it. Books, seminars, VHS tapes, later websites. He sells something called Reliance Defense Package, which tells people they can stop paying taxes and be legally protected because they relied on his research.
Courts absolutely annihilate this idea. Courts have addressed this argument in case after case after case, usually with a legal equivalent of a very deep sigh. And they're remarkably consistent. Minor textual differences do not invalidate ratification. Intent matters, substance matters, certification matters. And in the United States versus Benson, the courts go further. They don't just reject the theory, they call it fraudulent. They permanently barred Benson from selling any of these materials, which is the legal equivalent of saying, this isn't clever, my guy. This is dangerous.
Here's where things get really important. Courts don't just say this is wrong. They analyze why someone keeps making this argument. And courts consistently find that people pushing this theory are not confused about tax law. They understand what the law says. They simply believe they found a loophole that invalidates it. This belief is crucial because legally, that's not misunderstanding. That's defiance.
This conspiracy ruins people because it promises certainty, not maybe this will work. This invalidates everything. People don't hedge. They stop filing entirely. They stop paying for years. And by the time the IRS shows up at their door, their hole is really deep.
So yeah, the 16th Amendment was never ratified. Sounds dramatic. It feels like uncovering secrets. But the courts have been hearing and rejecting this argument for over 100 years. And every judge who sees it thinks the same thing. Not this again. So Miranda, what do you think about this theory?
Yeah, just don't try it, guys. It's been tried 1,000,000 times. If they didn't get it, you're not going to get it. I wish that a comma could give us all some freedom, but it doesn't. You're going to go to jail.
Yeah, and as someone who loves grammar, that just doesn't hold up in the 1913s, you know?
Maybe they just dropped some ink on the paper. That's not a comma.
Exactly. I mean, we were talking when people were handwriting things. You just wanted to get things done. So I'm not surprised that it's not word for word because we don't even know. It might not have been one person even copying it. It could have been 50 different people.
Exactly. I think intent is what's very important here, both in the ignorance of the law and in what the law means being ratified.
So yeah, our vote is don't press this one because you're just going to end up owing a lot of money and pissing off a lot of judges.
Yeah, they are not going to think it's cute.
Conspiracy 2. Paying taxes is voluntary. AKA, that word does not mean what you think it means.
What?
Okay, this one is dangerous because it sounds reasonable if you squint. This one is quieter, softer, more seductive. It starts with one phrase: voluntary compliance.
I'm pretty sure that's part of book talk, no? Anyway. Right. This isn't some This isn't someone just like yelling about secret tribunals or maritime law. This is someone very calmly saying, did you know the IRS itself admits the tax system is voluntary? And if you don't know anything about tax law, that sentence hits because voluntary is one of those words that feels like it means optional, like donating to NPR or going to the gym, not mandatory under penalty of law.
So let's talk about where this idea comes from, because it's not completely made up. The phrase voluntary compliance is real. The IRS uses it. And what it means is that the U.S. tax system is based on self-assessment. You calculate what you owe. You report it. The government checks it later. That's you fill out the form yourself, voluntarily. Not, I simply decline voluntarily. Like self-checkout. You can scan the groceries yourself, but you can't walk out. Okay, well, technically you can.
But there are going to be legal repercussions.
You really shouldn't. And it's the same with taxes.
Yes, it's the same with taxes. All right. But conspiracy movements, especially starting in the 1960s and 70s, they grabbed onto that wording. This is the era of distrust in institutions. In Vietnam, Watergate, civil rights abuses, people were already primed to believe the government was lying. I mean, and honestly, who could blame them? When someone said, hey, notice how they never explicitly say you must file? It landed, especially among the libertarian and anti-authoritarian communities.
This theory spreads in very specific ways. Not screaming, not ranting. It spreads quietly. Seminars, pamphlets, newsletters. Later, email chains. Then YouTube. It's always YouTube.
Always YouTube.
I'm sure it's on TikTok by now, too.
Oh, 100%.
It's always framed as helpful. I just want you to know your rights. And it often comes bundled with selective quotes from the court cases that are out of context. Always out of context. Because if you read the full opinion, the argument collapses immediately.
So why do people believe it? Well, this one preys on exhaustion. Taxes are overwhelming. The forms are confusing. The language is opaque. So when somebody tells you, actually filing is voluntary, it feels like relief. It feels like an exit sign in a maze until you realize it's just a sticker someone slapped on the wall and now you're running directly into that drywall. It lets people believe that they're not breaking the law. They're just like opting out. That distinction is psychologically huge.
Okay, we have to talk about Cheek versus United States because this case is the beating heart of conspiracy. John Cheek was an airline pilot. He filed taxes normally for years. Then he attended an anti-tax seminar. And after that, he stopped filing. He claimed his wages weren't income and taxes were voluntary. He argued he sincerely believed he wasn't required to file.
And the Supreme Court did something very specific here. They say, in criminal cases, willfulness matters. If someone genuinely misunderstands tax law, even if unreasonably, that can negate criminal intent. And that's where conspiracy spaces stop reading.
Because the court is crystal clear about something else. Believing the tax law is unconstitutional, invalid, or illegitimate is not a misunderstanding. It's knowing what the law says, but deciding you don't accept it. And legally, that's willfulness.
Courts draw a bright, glowing neon line between confusion and defiance. And they draw it early in permanent marker. Oops versus I refuse, I didn't understand, might protect you, but I don't accept it absolutely does not. Only one of those gets sympathy. This theory ruins people because it feels safe. It doesn't feel radical. It feels procedural. People think, worst case, the IRS disagrees. No, worst case, the IRS says you failed to file, assesses penalties, the courts say you acted willfully, and judges have zero patience for this argument now. Not reduced patience, not limited patience, none. They've heard it for decades.
So yeah, paying taxes is voluntary sounds comforting, but the courts have spent a century explaining why it's wrong.
And if someone tells you otherwise, they're not the one paying your penalties. Oh, so what do you think about this conspiracy theory?
Honestly, and this might sound a little mean, but I think the government needs to word things a little less vague so there's no misinterpretation. Do I believe it's voluntary? No. But do I believe people understand what that actually means in the way they're saying it means? No.
I wish it was voluntary. A girl can dream, huh?
Right?
Like, what if I just don't use anything the government provides for me? If you live off grid, should you be able to pay taxes? Should you be able to get a pass?
Right. I mean, let's just all be open and front. We all think taxes are a fraud anyhow to start with. So we're all looking for a way out. But I really do think in this case, I think the IRS needs to make things clearer because it is not voluntary. But they left themselves open to this, and now judges are paying the price.
Right, they got better things to do, y'all. All right, conspiracy number 3. I am a sovereign citizen, so tax law doesn't apply to me, aka legal cosplay with consequences.
Okay, so this is where the vibe shifts. This is where things get theatrical. This is the point where tax conspiracies stop being about just money and start being about identity. It blends misunderstood constitutional language, pseudo law, and identity politics.
This theory says you're not subject to federal law because you are a sovereign being, a state national, a living man or woman. This theory says I am not a U.S. citizen for legal purposes, or I am a state national, or I'm a freeborn individual, or I'm a living man, not a corporate entity. And if someone says any of those phrases out loud, you're already in a very specific cinematic universe.
This theory does not start with taxes. That's important. Sovereign citizen ideology predates modern tax fights. It comes out of a mix of post-Civil War legal confusion, anti-federal movements, and later, extremist ideology in the mid-20th century. Groups like Posse Comitatus, and I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, in the 1970s start pushing the idea that the federal government is illegitimate. And once you believe the federal government is illegitimate, taxes are the obvious next target because taxes are the most personal expression of government authority.
At the heart of sovereign citizen tax theory is the claim there are two versions of you, the real you and the secret corporate you, which is like insisting your email box isn't yours because Google technically owns the server. The real you, flesh and blood, and the legal you, a corporate entity created by the government, they'll tell you that your birth certificate, your social security number, and even the capitalization of your name creates a corporate straw man. And taxes, those apply to straw men, not to living individuals. This sounds insane when you say it fast, but when it's presented slowly in pseudo-legal language, maybe with some charts, citations, and a really confident speaker, people get pulled in.
This theory spreads because it doesn't just explain taxes. It explains everything. Why the system feels unfair. Why paperwork feels dehumanizing. Why you feel powerless. It tells people you are not failing. The system is targeting the wrong entity. And it gives people a sense of control back. All you have to do is say the right words, file the right documents, and use the right language. It's magical thinking wrapped in legal cosplay. Everyone else is in sweatpants, and this guy shows up to court in a cape.
I mean, I'm a big fan of capes, but not for court.
Courts have seen this argument thousands of times and consistently say the same thing. You cannot opt out of citizenships for tax purposes, and judges are not gentle about it. In the United States versus Sloan, the courts open with, like moths to a flame. That is not a neutral tone. Sloan argued that he was a freeborn citizen of Indiana, not subject to the federal law. He went to prison.
Here's where it gets really interesting legally. Courts don't treat sovereign citizen arguments as confusion. They treat them as deliberate rejection. Because the people making these arguments, they usually know what the law says. They're not misunderstanding definitions. They're just asserting an alternative reality. And the courts are very clear. Believing you're exempt does not make you exempt.
Courts escalate penalties fast on this one. They recognize this argument in the way doctors recognize a rash they've seen all week. Once the judges see the patterns, they stop explaining the plot. People who push sovereign citizen arguments often file dozens of motions. They flood the courts with paperwork. They repeat the same arguments after being corrected. At that point, the courts stop seeing this as a confused taxpayer. They see obstruction. At this point, the courts stop debating and start issuing invoices in the form of triggers sanctions, fines, and sometimes criminal charges.
This one is especially dangerous because it isolates people. It teaches them not to trust their lawyers, accountants, judges, or the IRS. Only the movement. Which means when things go wrong, there's no off-ramp, no professional help, no course correction, nobody to help your ass out of the hole you dug. So yeah, sovereign citizen tax theory promises freedom, but what actually delivers is isolation, penalties, and court orders written in all caps. And all with no one standing next to you when the judge sighs.
So thoughts about this?
Honestly, I think this is my favorite one because it is just so silly. Like, you could just, I'm two different people. All right, how much weed did you smoke when you thought of this? And can I have some?
And I've seen enough YouTube videos of sovereign citizens getting pulled over and the chaos that happens that I think we need to do our own video on sovereign citizens because I think they are all sus.
Super sus, but I do like to watch it. It is very entertaining.
Yeah, so we all agree as a theory, although you like it, it holds no merit.
Oh, it doesn't. I just want to believe it's true. I know it's not.
I would love to have a panel of judges talking about their experiences with sovereign citizens.
Oh, that would be great. Hey, any judges out there, hit us up. Tell us your experiences.
Or cops that have pulled over sovereign citizens and they tell you why you can't ticket them for speeding.
Or lawyers that have to deal with that afterwards. You know, whatever. Give us your stories.
Exactly. We're here for it. Conspiracy 4. The IRS isn't a real agency, aka, I didn't read the terms of government. Okay, this one is fascinating because it sounds almost philosophical. This isn't just, I don't like taxes. This is, I reject the legitimacy of the entire system.
The claim is usually something like, the IRS isn't in the Constitution, therefore it isn't real. Or, the IRS is a private corporation. Sometimes IRS Incorporated, which is always said with confidence and no evidence. And this theory feels very powerful to people who already trust institutions, which is most of us.
This run grew out of post-Watergate distrust in the government. In the 1970s and 80s, faith in the federal institution absolutely cratered. And tax enforcement, letters, audits, penalties, is one of the most visible expressions of governmental power. So anti-tax movements start reframing the IRS as illegitimate. Not wrong, not unfair, fake. And psychologically, that is a very different move.
Okay, here's why it works on people. The IRS isn't mentioned explicitly in the Constitution, which sounds like a mic drop until you remember neither is the Department of Education or the EPA or the FFA. But conspiracy thinking loves literalism. This is constitutional literalism taken to apt terms of service levels. Well, it didn't specifically say this button would charge me money. Yes, it did. You just didn't scroll. And they also point to obscure claims like, the IRS isn't created by positive law, which is legal jargon used completely out of context. People feel like they're discovering hidden corporate structures, but in reality, they're just misreading administrative law.
By the time this argument shows up in court, the patient budget is already gone. Because it's not a misunderstanding of tax law. It's a rejection of authority itself. Courts interpret this as deliberate obstruction. And Crane versus Commissioner is a perfect example. Crane argued that the IRS was a private corporation. The tax court had no authority, and the whole system was unconstitutional. The court's response was devastating. The court basically said, we're not going to dignify this with a response, which is the legal version of leaving someone on red. That's judicial shade.
This This conspiracy is uniquely dangerous because it isolates people from help. It tells them lawyers are corrupt, judges are illegitimate, and accountants are lying, which means no one is trusted enough to say, hey, this isn't working.
So yeah, the IRS isn't real sounds rebellious. It feels like unplugging from the system. But courts have been hearing and dismissing this argument for decades, and the dismissal is never gentle. So thoughts on this?
I mean, even if you do believe something is real, that doesn't stop it from being real.
Exactly. I don't think I ever thought any of the government agencies weren't real. I think you have to be very willful, to use the term that we've been talking about today, to believe that.
Right, like you're literally just deciding things. Like, I can't even put into words what I'm thinking here. It's a choice. It is a choice. No one actually believes that, surely.
And my question is, if you believe the IRS isn't real, do you believe all of the other agencies aren't real too? Any agency you might actually be benefiting from? Because it seems it has to be an all or nothing, because if what made the IRS is fake, then also all the other agencies are.
I mean, technically, sometimes I believe that nothing is real, so I don't know if that plays in at all.
But we all agree, if you believe this one, maybe you need to go back to, what was it? I can't remember. It's been so long. What was those?
Civics class?
Yeah.
Oh, and you're probably going to jail.
That too.
Conspiracy number 5. Wages aren't income. AKA, again, that's not what that word means, but I wish it did.
All right. This one is sneaky. Because if you don't know tax law, it sounds very reasonable. This is a conspiracy where people go, wait, hold on. I worked for this money. I didn't gain anything. I just exchanged my labor. And that word, exchange, is doing a lot of heavy emotional lifting here.
A lot. Because people hear income and they think that means profit. Like you bought something cheap and sold it expensive. So when someone online says your wages aren't income, they're an equal exchange of labor for money, people go, oh wait, that actually makes sense.
And this is why this theory spread so well among regular working people. Not billionaires, not tax shelter guys, bus drivers, teachers, nurses, people who feel like every dollar is already accounted for. It appeals to fairness instincts, deep ones, like, I already paid with my time, my body, my stress. Why is the government taking another cut? It's like saying, I already did the work. Why is there another step? Which is relatable, but unfortunately not how the system works, or paychecks, or adulthood. That emotional logic is powerful, but courts don't run on vibes, not even a little.
So this theory goes back decades, like post-World War II decades, when income tax became something that everyone experienced, not just the wealthy. Before that, income tax mostly hit higher earners, but once wages became primarily taxable on income for millions of people, resentment grew, and resentment always looks for legal justification.
This idea really takes off in the 1950s and 60s with early tax protester movements. Pamphlets, newsletters, late-night radio shows, and the core argument was always framed as intellectual, not rebellious. I'm not refusing to pay. I'm just pointing out a definition error. That framing is key because it lets people see themselves as rational, not defiant.
Let's be honest. The phrase wages are income is not intuitive. If someone asked you on the street, what is income? Most people would say, profit, extra money, gains. Nobody says compensation for the services under the International Revenue Code Section 61A1. But, that's literally what the law says.
And the courts have been very clear about this for over a century. Wages are income because income is defined broadly. All income from whatever source derived. This conspiracy ignores that definition and substitutes a philosophical one. And philosophy is where people get lost.
Let's talk about the United States versus Connor. Connor argued exactly this, that wages were not income, that filing a W-4 exemption was an evasion. He didn't just lose, he was convicted on multiple felony counts.
And courts have repeated this line in opinion after opinion. Every court which has ever considered this argument that wages are not income has rejected it, and they did not circle back. That's not casual language. That's judicial exasperation.
This theory is dangerous because it convinces people they're safe. It doesn't feel radical. It feels technical. People think again. Worst case, the IRS disagrees.
No. Worst case, you get penalties, interest, and potentially criminal charges because the courts treat this as settled law and the judges have stopped explaining themselves.
So, yeah, wages aren't income sounds intuitive, but the courts have heard it, rejected it, and in the way you reject something explained to you 6 times, they'll punish you for decades. Let me try that one again. So, yeah, wages aren't income sounds intuitive, but courts have heard it, rejected it in the way you reject something you've already explained 6 times, and punished it for decades. And if someone tells you otherwise on the internet, they're not the one paying your penalties. So, what do you think about this theory?
I can actually get behind this one. I agree too, because I feel like we're taxed in 2 ways. We're taxed for making the money, and then we're taxed when we spend the money. So, that's a lot that's get taken of us for the stress and the lack of work-life balance and the hours we put in all the time to make said money.
Oh, I agree. I absolutely think you're right. I don't think it should be this way at all. I think they should pick one. Either tax us on what we earn or what we buy, but not both. But it still is what it is currently, and pretending it isn't going to change it, and it isn't going to get you out of legal trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, clearly I still file taxes because I don't want to go to jail, but I'm disgruntled about it.
Right. It's begrudgingly filing taxes. I'm very cranky the whole time I'm doing it.
Exactly. And especially for us in Louisiana, who have the highest sales tax in the country, it really hurts to pay both state and federal income tax, and then also pay state sales tax and city sales tax and parish sales tax.
Oh, and we're also one of the poorest states.
Yeah. So we work to give all of our money to the government. So I can see why people would get behind this one. And if you have a charming enough person explaining it to you, why you'd believe it.
Oh, I absolutely can be fooled into this one. Conspiracy number 6. Tax day is a ritual, aka when bureaucracy meets astrology.
Okay, this one's different. It's a little less legal argument and a little more vibes-based cosmology. This is a conspiracy that says tax day isn't just a deadline, it's a ritual, a symbolic event, a psychological operation. Sometimes an occult one.
And before anyone laughs, we need to say this carefully, because this isn't about people being stupid. The theory grows out of something very real. How humans relate to time, power, and forced participation.
This theory doesn't come from tax law at all. It comes from ritual thinking. Every society has ritual dates: harvest, New Year's, religious observance. Tax day hits a very specific pattern. Once a year, same date, mass participation, consequences if you don't comply.
That already feels ritualistic in the human brain. And historically, taxes have always been ritualized. Even in ancient societies, tax collection happened on symbolic days tied to seasons, kings, gods.
In modern conspiracy culture, the idea emerges with numerology, symbolism, and distrust of elites. People start asking questions like, why April 15th? Why not a random date? Why spring? Instead of looking up the boring historical answers, which is, quote, administrative convenience and calendar reform, people fill in the gaps with meanings because humans hate meaningless power. We see the same thing when your calendar reminder pops up and your stomach drops before even remembering why.
So, April 15th becomes symbolic. Some say it's about rebirth and extraction. Some say it's about control through collective stress. Some go full occult and link it to fire festivals, sacrifice cycles, or elite rituals.
Here's the thing. Tax day genuinely feels awful. There's anxiety, there's shame, there's fear, comparison. People dread it all year.
And when millions of people feel the same dread at the same time, it feels coordinated. That's not a conspiracy. That's synchronized stress.
Here's the legal reality. Courts do not debate symbolism. They don't care if tax day feels ritualistic. They care if you filed. And when people bring up this argument into legal filings, and yes, they do, the courts classify it as frivolous or delusional. Not an insult, as a legal category.
This conspiracy usually shows up late. It's not where people start. It's where people go after legal arguments fail. When the law doesn't validate their feelings, they move to myth. And myth gives emotional meaning to where the law doesn't.
This theory reflects powerlessness, not rebellion. Exhaustion. People want to believe the pain has some purpose. The suffering isn't random, it's orchestrated. That's more comforting than this is how bureaucracy works.
The quiet truth is, tax day is ritualistic, but not because of occult elites. It's realistic because humans ritualize unavoidable systems. We give meaning because meaning helps us cope.
So yeah, tax day is a ritual sounds profound. It sounds like secret knowledge, but legally, it changes nothing. And psychologically, it tells us a lot more about how people process stress and why conspiracy thrives where systems feel cold. All right, what's your take on this one?
I mean, I get how people could think it's ritualistic, obviously, because it is the same day every year. But I mean, why is it April 15th? Why not April 15th? It has to be a day. We had to pick a day. Nobody was using it. So that's what we're doing. I ritualize everything, and I never really think of it in any sort of cosmic sense.
Yeah, I think this is the one that makes the least amount of sense to me. Because, so what if it is a ritual? Like, where does it get you with your taxes? You still have to file, you still have to pay. Like, it's not... I'm finding difficulty finding where the excuse is and how you get out of paying with this one.
Right. You still have to do it. You have to do it.
And I mean, if you think about it, like, why this day? Why this day for, like, everything that we do in life? Everything has a date.
Why not?
And it's usually random. So I guess I don't understand this. I don't understand the conspiracy behind it or what the value of the conspiracy is.
It sure is fun, though, isn't it?
It's something.
That's all we can say. It's whimsical. How courts actually decide who's confused and who's in trouble.
Okay, we need to pause here and zoom out for a second. Because if you noticed a pattern in all these conspiracies, you're not wrong. Every single one of them eventually runs into the same question in court. Not, is this argument creative? Not, is this emotionally compelling? But, did you know what the law required and chose not to follow it?
Courts use a word that sounds scary, but it's actually very specific. Willfulness. I'm sure you've heard us say it. And legally, willfulness doesn't mean evil or mean or anti-government. It means three things very plainly. The law imposed a duty. 2, you knew about that duty. And 3, you intentionally violated it. That's it. No vibes, no philosophy.
Let's talk about how the courts tell confusion from defiance. Courts aren't mind readers. They look at behavior. This is where a lot of people get surprised, because courts are actually very patient at first. If someone messes up their taxes because the system is confusing, that happens all the time. If someone believes something generally wrong because they were misled, courts may still impose civil penalties, but they don't jump straight to criminal intent. That shift happens when correction enters the picture.
Here's the moment everything changes. The warning, an IRS letter, a court explanation, a prior case ruling. Once the law has been explained to you, continuing the same argument, it tells a story. And that story is no longer, I don't understand. It just becomes, I don't accept it.
And courts are very explicit about this. Repeating a rejected argument after being warned is evidence of willfulness. And that's why penalties escalate. That's why judges stop explaining themselves. And that's why some opinions sound, well, irritated.
Another pattern courts see? Paper flooding. Endless filings. Motions full of buzzwords, recycled language. And at that point, courts stop seeing advocacy. They see obstruction.
Okay, now for the part that makes everyone sad. Because this pattern is consistent. the people who promote these conspiracies rarely end up in court. They sell books. They host seminars. They run YouTube channels. They phrase everything just carefully enough to avoid personal liability. This is just information. Do your own research. I'm not giving legal advice.
And the people who actually pay the price are the followers. Regular people, working people, people who trusted someone who sounded confident. They're the ones facing penalties, liens, garnishments, and sometimes prison.
People sometimes read court opinions and think judges are being harsh. But here's what's really happening. Judges have seen these arguments for decades. They know how they end. They know the human cost. And they're trying, sometimes bluntly, to shut the door before more people walk through it. So if you're filing your taxes today, or an overachiever who's already done them February 1st, congratulations on participating in society.
We salute you.
If you're tempted by conspiracy to not file, remember, the courts have seen it, heard it, and fined it. If you don't want to end up owing the government even more, you better get cracking on that 1040. You've got till midnight.
Today's takeaway is simple. The internet is very confident, and the courts are very tired. If a conspiracy promises freedom, but ends in penalties, liens, or prison, it's probably not the loophole you think it is. Thanks for spending tax day with us. And remember, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay seriously sus. You've just tuned in to Seriously Sus with Nanette and Miranda, your ultimate source of sus with a side eye. Thanks for hanging out with us today. If today's episode made you think twice, hit that like button, subscribe, follow us at Seriously Sus Podcast for more deep dives into crime, drama, and cultural chaos. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay sus.
Outro music!
Outro music! La la la!
We hate taxes!
Boo taxes! Outro music.